The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. We have a really eclectic and exciting show tonight.
Okay, my name is Sapir Handelman. I have two hats. On one hand, I'm leading the Minds of Peace organization, which is committed to involve the people in the peacemaking effort through the establishment of a major Israeli-Palestinian public negotiating congress. And for my living, I'm an academic. I write articles. I even won a prize for my academic work.
Well, I was a squadron commander in the late 70s and the early 80s. I was lucky enough to establish the first F-16 squadron in the early 80s. That's how I was the leader of the raid in 1981 when we flew to Baghdad and destroyed the Iraqi nuclear reactor, June 1981, and later on I was the commanding officer of the Israeli flying school, or flight academy as you may call it, and I retired in 1990. Many Palestinians live under our regime, and it can be done. Of course, those who don't want to stay there under Palestinians' regime can go back to Israel, as the people from Yamit and Ofira did in the late 70s when Leon and his friend helped to make the peace treaty with Anwar Sadat. And it looked like a tragedy, and it was a tragedy for many people. And you know, a short time beforehand, Moshe Dayan had said that it's better to have Sharm el-Sheikh and not have peace. And later on, he helped to sign a treaty and take all the people from Ofira and Yamit back to Israel. So I believe that people can remain in Ariel and Kiryat Arba, and some people will prefer to go to Israel and have a peace treaty this way. I prefer, of course, to live in Israel and not under Palestinians, but maybe some thousands of settlers will prefer to live in Kiryat Arba and Ariel under Palestinian and try. Maybe it will work, maybe not. Maybe they will try it and will fail, and they will all go west to Israel. I don't know, but this should be the first step, I believe.
Settlers who coming to our public negotiating congresses believe that they're fighting for their lives. And part of them, I don't know percentages because I don't have polls, are willing to stay there under Palestinian sovereignty in a condition that minority rights are going to be guaranteed. Now I think the question is not just solutions, because there's a couple of solutions. The question is how to create an effective peacemaking process that serious solutions come to the table and involve and prepare the public on both sides to major compromise that everyone has to do. Okay, so if a representative of Palestinian Authority was sitting here, will tell you that Ehud Barak didn't give them anything. This is story that we hear. I think what was happening, and this is my view. After Barak was negotiated, and Arafat didn't sign, and Arafat was blamed for this. I don't know if injustice, not injustice. He went to the Arab nations, and they asked him, why didn't you sign? So he said, if I would sign, you wouldn't keep me alive. In other words, Barak was negotiate with someone that cannot reach a decision. Barak was negotiating with himself. Now, to answer your question, I think, and this is the polls say, and this is what we see in our Congress, most of the people, I'm not speaking about leadership, are willing to compromise and want to accept and to end it. And when we are doing our congresses and people ask the same question to the Palestinian delegation, Barak and Olmert give you anything, why didn't you take them? So the Palestinians said, they didn't offer to me. This is something that I hear in the news. I'm here to negotiate and I'm willing to accept reasonable compromise. And I think this is the people on both sides.
Well, if you look at what happened to the map of our country, starting from 1947, of course we can start earlier, but let's start from 1947. You can see that during the years, the Palestinian territory is shrinking. In 47, they could have a large part of the Galil, for instance, which is Israeli. The whole of the Galil is Israeli from 1948 on. Although there are thousands and thousands of Arabs there, and if you look at the West Bank with the clusters, or how do you call it in English, you can see how the Palestinian territory is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and by agreeing to the present situation with the clusters of the Israeli settlements, they give up many of their dreams. We shouldn't underestimate this agreement, this step. You must remember that for them, Jaffa and Haifa and Akko and Ashkelon, Rajdal, they are all Palestinian territories. And by agreeing that people remain in Kiryat Arba and in Ariel, etc., in Gush Etzion, for instance, for them it's something that they could not even imagine 50 years ago. For them, Gush Etzion and Ariel and Kiryat Arba, it's all Palestinian territory. By agreeing that we stay in Gush Etzion and Kiryat Arba and Ariel, for them is something much harder than for us to agree that Israel live there under Palestinian sovereignty or government.
Leaders negotiate in two levels, one between themselves and one between their people. And our initiative is to involve the people and to press the leadership to work for us. Like there's something that's called the agency problem. I vote for Sharon to keep the settlement, and he evacuated them. And the question is how to press them. And this is our initiative, is to involve the people and to prepare them for reasonable compromise and to press the leadership to reach agreement. I'm not sitting in Abu Mazen, I'm sitting with my Palestinian friends. And the idea is to create such, I believe that if a major public negotiating congress will start to fly, Abu Mazen and Netanyahu will run to reach an agreement. Because Netanyahu will not be able to say, I don't have coalition, and Abu Mazen will not be able to say they're going to kill me because the people are with us. And I think this is exactly what was happening in South Africa and Northern Ireland. It took a long time. But in the end of the day, the moderate centers get together, fight the extremists, and press the leadership to reach agreement. This is exactly what we try to do.
Well, I saw it in 1982 when we flew over Beirut and other places in Lebanon, and in other occasions in the 70s and later on. And I think the Israeli Air Force is making an outstanding effort to avoid hitting uninvolved or innocent people. The problem is that in Gaza Strip, the points from which they fire the rockets and the point where they start the tunnels that go to Israel under the border to places like Nahal Oz, etc., etc., they are located very close, or maybe under schools and mosques and things like that, on purpose. And once and again, we try to avoid killing innocent people, and we don't always succeed. But you cannot avoid it totally. Unlike the other side who fires rockets in order to kill civilians. They don't fire the rockets on military bases like Tel Nof and other places. They fire them at Tel Aviv and Ashkelon and Ashdod. And those tunnels go under the kibbutzim and in order to explode other the civilian places. So we are trying to avoid it, and on many occasions we miss opportunities to kill terrorists because we don't want to hurt children and women, etc. But we don't always succeed. Sometimes it's impossible, and sometimes it happened because some of the information, the intelligence that we have is not perfect.
And also they're afraid to live in Hamas. Under Hamas regime, I don't believe that you would be happy to live in Islamic autocracy. So our congresses are public, so we didn't have a participant for Gaza. And just to remind, there was a civil war there, and there was until recently, Gaza and the West Bank were politically divided. Now there's some kind of unity government that we don't know what it's worth, but people from Gaza cannot come here. The Palestinians have to decide about it, and one of the question that the Palestinians used to be very embarrassed about it, that I think they have asked once, who I'm talking to. I'm talking to the people in Gaza, I'm talking to the people on the West Bank, because, you know, and the Palestinians all the time say that we are one nation, but no doubt that they have major problems. It seems to me that before, you know, the recent development, the people from the West Bank were negotiated from themselves. Hopefully to create hope that it will, the whole idea is to get progress with the people in the West Bank, that hope will go to Gaza, not despair in Gaza and go to the West Bank. How it's going to be the final solution, or I don't know, perhaps, no doubt that there was two entities here. And of course there's a solution to make them join together, but they have to decide if they're going to be Gaza and the West Bank, and it seems that this is the direction, but I'm not sure.
Well, I really believe, as I said before, that Benjamin Netanyahu with Yair Lapid and even Lieberman, with a different coalition, with the Labour Party and the Haredim, can make peace, can, like Menachem Begin did, with the help of Dayan and Weizmann and people like Leon, and but not with the present coalition. With the present coalition, he cannot make it because of the pressure from the right, from Naftali Bennett and his guys of the Jewish Home. We cannot afford pessimism. Even one of our greatest writers, Yosef Chaim Brenner, who was a great pessimist, was, after all, an optimist, and he stayed in Israel, although he was the ultimate pessimist. And I believe we cannot afford despair, and we cannot afford pessimism.
I think optimism is a moral obligation, but it is not a strategy. We have to create hope, to bring optimism to both society. At this situation, the majority on both societies are desperate. And everyone knows that the solution has to be politically, but they don't see the tunnel. You have to create the atmosphere of optimism in the societies. The people that we are on a daily contact, they believe in peace, that they think that this is the only way to go forward. The atmosphere in the Palestinian streets is not good now. They are angry, like the Israelis are angry. Our partners think that this is the only way to go forward. And they think that public opinion can change. Now the situation is very hard on both sides. All, the prejudice, because people are angry.
Well, first of all, I would like to quote the Chief of Staff. When we flew to Baghdad, the Chief of Staff was Rafael Eitan. And when we discussed peace, he said, relating to peace now, he said, the problem is now. He said, maybe it takes 200 years So it will take 200 years, and don't rush. And the refugees, I believe, maybe a very small amount of a few hundreds or maybe slightly more, but we cannot afford having the mass. Now they're talking about millions, because the way they treat the refugees in Gaza Strip and other places makes it unsolvable. So maybe a symbolic small amount of refugees can go back maybe to that village in the Galil or some other place, symbolic, but not, the problem has to be solved and can be solved in the Palestinian authorities, places like maybe Jordan Valley, Gaza Strip, maybe Sinai, maybe places like that, but we cannot bring the refugees back to Haifa, to Jaffa, and it's impossible. They have to be compensated economically by the West has to help us solve it economically, also with our funds, of course, of the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, Israel and other, and most of the people will have to be compensated and cannot go back to their homes, with the key that they carry for more than 60 years, and they cannot go back to Jaffa and Haifa.
Most of the Palestinians, as I can see, know that the refugees are not going to come to Israel. And they distinguish between the right of return and the implementation of the right of return. The right of return is something that they can dream about. The implementation has to be negotiated. And I think that they believe that it will never be implemented, maybe small amounts. And the problem of the refugees, that it's a humanitarian problem, have to be solved by the international community and the Arab states. And this is the solution that in all our congresses we are reaching, because the people in Palestine believe that there's not going to be the right of return. They know it. And once I got a phone call from the public relation of the Prime Minister's house, and they asked about our initiative. And I said, okay, let's meet. And then they vanished. So when we did the last congresses in Jerusalem, we marched to the Prime Minister's house to give the agreements. We reached bodyguards that didn't let us go in, and they didn't want to accept the agreements. Benjamin Netanyahu.
Bibi.
So we didn't have any contact with them. I know that on the Palestinian side, they took the agreements, they brought it to Abu Mazen, and they brought it in the Hamas, and even in the, ironically, there's many paradoxes in this conflict. In the site of the Hamas, there is mention of our initiative with video clip.
The website.
In the website, yes. It was, yes, very, very interesting. I don't know why, and this is, one of the paradoxes. And to answer, I didn't have any contact with Bibi Netanyahu, and I think politicians have to make pressure that they will come to you. However, on the other hand, John Kerry's team, they contacted us, not Kerry himself, and they met with us a couple of times. They were very interested in our work. It was not our initiative, it was their initiatives, to meet with us and to hear about it, and they want to support it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for helping us to promote the peace idea in the Middle East.
All right, we'll be back to talk about a very pleasant subject called terror in Iraq. And we have a true expert on it, Shimshon Issaki. And he was a member of the intelligence service in Israel. He won't tell you where, why, how, where, what. They're always that way, but I think ultimately he'll tell you that he did serve his country. And they always say they served in the Prime Minister's office. Why do they say that? I don't know. They should say they're labor ministers. It's easier, but we'll be right back.
Peace means taking into account the dignity of other people and the fact that there are other people who have certain rights.
Peace in the Middle East basically will come when the clergy in the mosque on Friday preach it, and when the rabbis in the synagogue on Saturday preach it. During the time of Camp David I, you had political leadership that was able to contain that type of religious fervor. What the country needs is some prescient understanding of what is going to happen in the future.
Tune in when the Leon Charney Report begins a special series on the Israeli-Palestinian question.
The Leon Charney Report congratulates the team of BDC, The Price of Peace, and Leon Charney on the New York Emmy Awards win. The documentary reveals the true story of the negotiations leading up to the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time, the Camp David Accords between Israel and Egypt. Watch it on Hulu.com or buy the special feature edition DVD at select stores.
Now get the book the hit movie was based on, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the backdoor channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. You may remember that about 2-3 weeks ago we had Shimshon Issaki on, who wrote a book called Terror and Iraq. And we spoke about Iraq and whether the war in Iraq was correct. He said yes. He said that there are ways and methods to control the Islamic terrorism. And we thought we'd bring him back for part 2 because he has some interesting observations about Iran and its capabilities for nuclear armaments. And why that became more interesting to us is because there are waves that say that the United States and Hillary Clinton has made some overtures towards Syria to start some conversations with Syria. Now, if you're any type of a Middle East expert, you will know that Syria is connected very strongly to Iran, and Iran is funding the Hezbollah. So the question is, with this overture by Mrs. Clinton, what do we think is going to happen in Iran and in Syria, and how will that affect the state of Israel? So we brought Shimshon back to give us his analysis of this situation. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, you heard my prologue.
Yes.
And anything changed in 2 weeks since I saw you?
I still don't see any deadline where this political approach towards Iran is leading. Because
all right, Mrs. Clinton has made some overtures, State Department, of conducting some talks and bringing Syria back into the Western world, at least the American world, and George Bush was totally against it. What do you think of that policy?
I doubt very much if Syria will be able to split from Iran. No
I
doubt.
say that for years. I say if Assad did that, he'd get a state funeral, and we would all be marching to drum beats and a lot of military salutes. Would they take him down if he did that? I'm talking about, would Iran take down Assad if he sort of broke away and went to the West? What's your opinion?
Iran cannot take down Bashar Assad.
They can't?
No, they can't, because Bashar Assad can move if he wants.
To Brooklyn? Where?
No, to stay in Syria. He can move from, he can depart himself, theoretically, but practically...
But Shimshon, when Syria wants to take down Harari in Lebanon, they shut him.
For Iran, I don't think that Iran will do the same as Syria did with Harari, or Iran with Harari, let's say, with the backing of Syria. There is some indications that Iran is behind as well the assassination of Harari.
Is that right?
Yes, there are some indications, and there are still the case is under investigation. It's not yet, although the trial opened in The Hague.
So let's go to Iran. You're having sleepless nights. I talked to you last time you were on the show. You have sleepless nights about terrorism, which I think most people do. You know more than everybody because you've been in that service for a long period of time. He was in part of the intelligence of Israel 44 years, and most people remember you from the last time on the show. So now we're into Iran. Iran is not pulling back. It seems that they're going forward with their possibility of nuclearization for armaments. So Mrs. Clinton is talking to Syria. Is that a point of weakness for the United States? Should they be doing that at this point?
In the Arab world, if you are going more for a lenient way, this is accepted as a sign of weakness, not a strength.
All right, so I ask you pointedly, if the United States makes overtures, which George Bush did not want to do, and the United States makes overtures, Obama's policy is to make overtures, that makes the United States look weak?
In the area, yes.
Well, we don't care about San Francisco. We care about the Arab area.
Yeah, the Arab area, exactly. I don't think that Saudi Arabia or Egypt would like very much the American, let's say, approach in a way to give some points to Bashar Assad and Iran. We cannot split now between the two. There are two together. They have a strategic commitment between them. They are together. We have to see them both in the one.
Right. Do you think that Israel should be having talks with Syria?
I think so. I think Israel should.
So why couldn't the United States do it?
Because for Syria, with
it's local. Huh?
Israel will talk with Syria from a strong position, because.
All right, I get it. Israel, when it talks to Syria, they're on the same boundaries. It's a sovereignty, and they're looking to make peace. The United States, when it makes its a policy, the Arab world thinks it's a sign of weakness, so it's very dangerous.
Same with Iran.
In Iran and Iraq. So, but do you think the United States is talking to Syria without coordination with Israel? You think it's on its own? What do you think?
I don't think so. Maybe they informed Israel, but not coordinating. I think they informed. The United States doesn't need Israel, but I think that the United States is well aware of the interest of Israel and
when you worked in the Mossad, did you have a lot of cooperation with the CIA? Did they work with you?
Myself personally as well.
You did. You had a lot of conversations.
Yes,
and they were very helpful.
Yes. Yes.
There's great coordination. There was a very famous spy named Angleton, or what was his name? The famous CIA guy. He doesn't want to talk about everything.
No.
We'll break some news here. But so basically the defense intelligence people in Israel and the CIA coordinate very well. How about with Great Britain? Also good.
Also good.
And most of the Western world, right?
Most of the Western world are more cooperating with Israel, because after all...
all right, I'm one of the people that brought Turkey back to Israel. I brought them back through Ezer Weitzman, the former president, and Turkey's on the border of Syria. They are trying to mediate something between Israel and Syria. Is that a good thing?
Yes. Yeah, I think that it is a positive approach in a way, and I would support that, of course, because I think that at the end of the road, Israel and Syria should come to terms to understand that.
Well, they tried. I had Eob Barak on, who told me he was meeting with the defense minister or foreign minister years ago. With, Muallim. And I think that, but you know, one thing about Syria, by the way, they don't really cause a lot of trouble up there. It's sort of a standstill, right? They haven't used. They're not jumping around.
No, you know, the Golan Heights are okay. They say it is ours, but they will not go to war because of the Golan Heights.
All right, let's go to Iran and tell me what we, as the Americans, should do, or the world, the Western world, should do.
First of all, the United States should see that the interest of the neighboring countries, what are their opinion? Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, and Israel in this respect. I think the United States should make it quite clear to Iran that there is a time limit that they have to compile with.
And what happens if not?
If Cuba.
All right, we're going to cut for a break. We'll come right back, and he'll tell you what we should do to Iran in case they violate the timetable. We're back. We're talking to the very interesting Shimshon Issaki, who's written the book Terror in Iraq. Maybe you bought the book already from the last show. If not, I suggest that you do it, because you'll be informed about the most fundamental problem in the world today, which is called fundamentalism. And, you know, I say on this show, and I've said it for about 2 years, who knows, that the political control of the sovereignty and these nations in the Middle East has been lost to basically the clerics, the mullahs, and the imams, and also the fundamental rabbis in Israel.
No doubt.
And I think that the political ability of Mubarak and Hussein has been dwarfed a little bit by the religious leaders who preach fundamentalism, and they do it. You're right. You said it last week or a couple of weeks ago on the show, that they go to the mosque and they have SMSs right away. This instant communication, and they can rile the public up in 5 minutes, and bingo, it goes out. And you saw in Iraq when they tried to bring a government together, they had to make a lot of peace with the religious leaders, which is really it's fundamentalism.
Bothering.
Very, very. And now, Ahmadinejad is not really running Iran. The
clerics.
Khomeinis are running it.
Khatimai
is running it.
Khatami.
I worked on the Iranian hostage crisis for President Carter. And I remember those days very, very carefully. And I remember when Khomeini came in. And did you people know, by the way, that when the United States brought the Shah in here was a dangerous move? Well, you have no recollection of that. You remember when we brought the Shah, we let him come in? What did you people think?
I think that at that time, there was a mistake not supporting the Shah when he needed the support in order to stop Khomeini activities there.
Could we have done more, the United States?
No doubt.
Really?
No doubt, yes. I think that was a mistake, because the attitude was, and in some way is still, that we need to follow democratic
principles.
But democracy in the West is not a democracy in that area of the world. It's something we cannot impose our
standards of democracy. But Shimshon, one of the basic policies of George Bush was to make Iraq a democracy. Do you think it's a democracy today?
No, it was totally a mistake. It was totally
What do you
mistake.
think of Maliki, the prime minister? You know anything about him? You read about him?
Yeah, Maliki, believe me, he is more pro-Iranian than
right?
you can anticipate.
He's a Shiite?
He's a Shiite. He is originally from El Dawa. It's worth to to learn about al-Dawa and its role in recruiting and promoting fundamentalism and terrorism in this respect. But of course, he is a Shiite. The Shiite are the majority. I think that one of the mistakes of the Bush administration was to neglect the Sunnis in Iraq and to rely on the Shiite because they are the majority.
All right. So, but you agreed last time you were on the show that toppling Hussein was a good idea. So what have we accomplished? What kind of society is Iraq today?
I think the concern should be left to the Iraqis to decide for themselves what kind of society they would like. If they would like it semi-democracy or democracy as it is in Egypt, not to say about Saudi Arabia or Jordan or elsewhere. This is to leave it to them. They have to decide for themselves. You cannot impose. The mentality is totally different. The lifestyle is different.
We know that. All right, so the question to you is the fact that Maliki is close to Iran. Could it happen that those two get together, Iran and Iraq, against the Western world now? Could Iraq join them?
This is a possibility.
So then it's very dangerous. Then what have we accomplished?
Of course, because the Shiite, Iran has now big influence in southern Iraq upon the Shiite in the area. Although there is, as I said, there is a big hatred between the Persian Iranian and the Arabs. But nevertheless, the interest now is of the Shiite in Iraq is...
All right, I think two key players in the Iran situation are China and Russia. And I was in China on a state visit, and I spoke to the vice premier about it. And one of and they were very nice, but they said that one of the reasons they were dealing with Iran was for the oil, the ability to get the oil, and if they don't have enough oil, their industry collapses, and you know the whole story. With Russia, I'm not sure, because they do have oil, so they're trying to be a Middle East player again. Putin may be moving around. I don't know. I want your assessment of that.
Putin is coming back to be
a demagogue.
Another
demagogue.
Superpower vis-a-vis America in that respect.
Not Putin, Russia.
He is trying to weaken, all efforts to weaken the American positions around the world, wherever he can. And in the Middle East is part of it. We can see that there is more approaches to the Middle East. Iran is a very good venue for Russia to have the influence again, because Egypt will not fall again, at least for the time being, back to the Russian influence.
Well, the United States gives them $3.5 billion.
Exactly.
So it's all money.
Jordan the same. So the Gulf states will, of course, they will not rule. But if Iran will have the influence, so the Russian influence in that area will go through Iran.
That's danger.
This is why I said before that if you ask me what will be 5 years from now, if we continue as we're doing now, then the world will be more dangerous.
So I bring you to an appointment with Hillary Clinton and the National Security Advisor. What would you tell them today?
I would tell them to think about taking a few steps, putting pressure on countries that are indirectly or directly supporting terrorism. Syria, Pakistan.
Pakistan's a mess. Boy,
Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Gulf states, mainly with the money. You are going to close Guantanamo, and already some of the detainees had been released to the Saudis. The next day, one of them is the deputy commander of Al-Qaeda in Yemen.
Is that true?
Yes.
And we Americans know that, and we're allowing
Yeah,
that?
it was published. It is published. So, I mean, you have to look the whole
So what
picture.
you're saying really is you have to change the mindset of the democratic countries in the Western world. They have to change their mindset. They have to be more aggressive in their pursuit of these people, even if it violates a little bit of civil rights. That's the balance we call the balance of power.
Yes.
Famous judge said that shouting fire in a theater is against the law because you cause a crush. So that's called the balance of the constitutional rights of the individual. So we really, what you're saying is we have to awaken the Western world to this dilemma. What's your background? Did you go to school in Israel? Where did you go to school?
I finished my high school in Iraq. So I studied
you
the history.
In Iraq?
In Iraq, yeah. I left Iraq when I was 16 years old.
Who was the leader at that time?
I think Nouri Said.
How was the Jewish population treated?
Well, we were second citizen.
I guess if
it was a fear. I mean, we couldn't. We have, let's say, property and so, but we have always to pay in
Ransom?
order to
bribery.
yes, bribery and other things.
What did your father do in Iraq?
My father was the sole importer of tea from Ceylon, Sri Lanka.
That's nice.
And
Iraq was English. They drank a lot of tea.
A lot of tea. And you know, by I closed the cycle unintentionally when I retired. I became a businessman. I have a trade company. So.
All right, that's nice. Now, when you went to university in Israel?
Yes, I studied at the Hebrew University. I got a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies, and I wrote already one book in Hebrew called In the Eyes of the Arab, the 6 Days War. And it was the same idea why I had, at that time, when I was in the military intelligence,
right.
I was the only one who had been permitted to write the book, book, when I was still in service. So it was published.
That's a big deal because in those days they had a censor in Israel, a very tough censor. And now you're basically a businessman, but you follow and you know the Middle East. Are you called upon sometimes to give your consultants and analysis?
Once you're intelligence officer, you're all your life intelligence officer. It's hard to leave what you worked for over 40 years.
You have family too?
I have a family, wife, 4 children, five
children. Are they all they're living in Israel?
All living in Israel. Yeah.
Any in intelligence now?
Well, let's.
What I mean
let's
is,
keep the.
What I mean is intelligence if they're studying comic books, you know.
Yes. If this is the question, the answer is yes.
Do you feel that Israel has enough military power now to combat Iran by itself that doesn't need the assistance of the United States?
Israel needs the assistance in a way, but I think that Israel can protect itself this way or another. Let them believe. I don't know if we do have nuclear capability or not, but anyway, let them believe that we do have.
That's a famous issue in Israeli history about Ben Gurion talking about whether they have nuclear power or not nuclear power, and he gave the answer. There's always a nebulous answer. I saw that Vanunu was recommended for a Nobel Prize. Did you see that?
This is the hypocrisy.
Did that turn your stomach? Vanunu was the man who talked about the Israeli atomic energy plants in Dimona and leaked the story. People forgot about him, but he was put on trial. He went to jail, and I think he's out of jail now. Am I correct?
No.
He's still in jail? He's still in jail?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. All right, last question. There's a famous case in this country called Pollard. You know about this case.
Yes.
In your opinion, and our audience is, this guy is in jail for 20, 25 years already. Why do you think we don't allow this guy out? And I know there are very many people in the American government who wanted to free Pollard, but the thing that I always heard is that the CIA people were totally against it. Have you ever talked or been involved or heard about what the whole situation is with Pollard, why they don't free him? Do you have any idea?
Personally, I wasn't involved in it, but I think that it is a mistake to keep him that long time. It was a mistake in the first place.
To recruit him?
He was not recruited he was not recruited by the intelligence services.
No, there was a special unit in the defense ministry.
Out of the authority of...
The guy who did it was a guy named Rafi the Stinker, he was called.
Okay, so you know very well.
I know, no, it's not my first show. And so he was recruited. There was a special unit in the defense. There was another fella called Sela, who was in the Israeli Air Force, and he doesn't come to the United States yet. But many people asked me about the Pollard case. For full disclosure, there was a point where I did represent Pollard as an attorney. And if you read Wolf Blutz's book, Territory of Lies, you'll see that I was there. And also, I know a lot about the case, but I don't know why. And I'll tell you that the Secretary of Defense at one time, Les Aspin, wanted to help. He was very pro-Israel. I believe that Clinton, if he could, would have. But whatever I was told, I always heard that there was too much compromise made to some CIA agents, and they don't want to let him out, and they think he still knows stuff. I met a man 2 weeks ago who told me, I don't want to go too far with this, that he's somebody he knows is in the CIA who interrogated Pollard, and they believe he still has information. This is how it's 20, 25 years. Sounds crazy.
Crazy.
And
Totally.
And I know our audience is very, very interested in that case.
I think there is some more. I don't know if it is a personal
I don't
thing
know.
or something
Nobody
like
can
that.
figure this thing out.
I mean, it has no any precedence in the history like this. I mean, I don't know why that stubborn. Maybe it is to balance. Look, we are not that totally in the America is not totally in the hands of Israel.
I don't know the answer.
It's
all right, my last question. Who's your hero in this world?
Ben-Gurion.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
He had a vision.
Did you know him, Ben-Gurion?
I know him. I knew him personally. He had a vision to foresee. For example, there was a debate. Should we accept the
reparation?
48? Yes, it was a very small country, very narrow. He said, look, he had a vision. Let's take it now. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. Contrary to the Arab world, where they made all the political mistakes in their decision. They did agree 48 and not 49 and not 67 and so far, never. So I think he was the great, and until now we're looking for another Ben-Gurion, which unfortunately
you can find his grandson in a hotel here. I think he runs a hotel. He's been on the show. He's a good guy.
Yes, okay.
Shimshon, good to see you again. Thank you for coming.
You very much.
And I hope you're wrong about what you predicted on my last show, that 5 years from now the world won't look any better. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's getting any better at this point. And somehow fundamentalism has to be controlled. And I guess in order to understand it better, you should be reading Shimshon's book, which is Terror and Iraq.